ahead on NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
What are the best ways to improve your forage resources and maximize profitability in your cattle operation? We'll visit with the experts from Dow AgroSciences next.
And now, NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen with host Kevin Oxner.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. I'm Kevin Oxner. Thanks for joining us. For as long as cattlemen have been caring for cows, the lowest cost feed source has always been grass. For most cattlemen, high quality forage is critical not only to the nutrition and health of their herd, but also to the profitability of their operation. With strong calf prices, the stage is set for herd expansion. For most operations, long-term success will be built on forages rather than on grain or purchase feed. So today, we're going to focus on the steps you can take to improve and maximize your forage value with the expert insights from leading producers and from our friends at Dow AgroSciences. So let's begin by welcoming our panel today. Dave Owens is the portfolio marketing leader for Dow AgroSciences. Bill Topper is a cow-calf producer from Trigg Hollow Farm in Tennessee. Pat Birch is with us. He's a field scientist with Dow AgroSciences. And Sims Price is a cow-calf producer from the Price Ranch in Texas, winner of the National Environmental Stewardship Award. Gentlemen, welcome to the show and thank you for coming.
Thanks. Thank you.
Well, I want to begin, first of all, by getting just some general impressions about the industry. You talk to a lot of folks just like I do. And, you know, I sense a great sense of optimism in the beef cattle business. How about you, Dave?
Oh, absolutely. We started at convention, I think, really last year and continued on. You can just sense that things are really turning around, especially for our cow-calf operators. They're doing extremely well. Profitability is up. And with the global demand for the beef skyrocketing, things are really set for a good long run.
Bill, what would you say?
Oh, absolutely. We have a lot of positive discussions alongside the road in the mornings when we're sipping our coffee about expanding our operations and, again, enhancing profitability.
Good. And Pat?
Yes, I think one of the biggest attributes that people are looking forward to this year is we've had such good moisture. We've had a great moisture this winter. Spring's a little slow to get here, but very optimistic about that.
And Sims, speaking of moisture, I know you have been through a number of years of drought.
Yes,
what's your sense relative to the state of the industry?
Well, with the cattle prices, what they're at today, we're just all eager to keep expanding our herds. If we can just get a little bit of rain to help us along, it'll sure be easy to keep growing.
You know, last year when we were on the show, Dave, we talked a lot about the whole high prices of feed grains and the importance that shown on forages. Now that we've seen those feed grains moderate, are forages still important, do you believe?
Oh, absolutely. We're really entering into a new age of forages. They've always been the lowest price method to produce feed for your cattle, and they're still going to be the lowest cost price. I mean, we're talking on average across the nation, 45 cents to 50 cents worth of forage to put on a pound of beef. That's very, very economical. And as you look at what those big grain prices did, they took a lot of grassland out of production. And in some states, as many as 1 million acres of grass went into grain. So with that transition, we're going to have a lot of folks that are going to be in a wonderful position to maximize returns and yields on the grass that they have left and take advantage of a smaller acre base. It's going to be the key to expansion, is a good forage base going forward.
And speaking of good forage base, Bill, I'd ask you, I understand you've started your operation relatively recently, but you've decided to base it and focus it around forage production. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, the reason why we did that, I mean, we started 3 years ago with this operation. It was basically a renovation startup approach to cow-calf in southern Tennessee. And the approach that we pursued was because it allowed us to have a broader scope of variables that we could manage, if done correctly, could enhance profitability.
Let's take a closer look at Bill Topper's farm in Tennessee as Brian Baxter reports.
For cow-calf producers, maintaining their forage base and the condition of their cows is essential to keeping their herd productive. but every operation faces different challenges. For example, Bill Topper has been around agriculture most of his life, but his 800-acre farm in Middle Tennessee is a place he and his wife just bought a couple of years ago.
The pastures, when we drove through the place with the realtor, and he drove us around on a four-wheeler, and I can tell you that the weeds were so high that there were often times where we would drive across a field with the four-wheeler, you couldn't see where you're going. And you really had to literally, pardon the pun, see through the weeds to be able to envision what it could be, as a really good place to raise cattle. But now we're in the process as a full-blown cattle operation. It's taken us about 2 years to get to where we are today.
Weeds are a battle nearly all producers face when trying to improve or simply maintain their forage resources so they meet their herd's nutritional needs. Bill Topper started by identifying his biggest weed problem, which in this part of the country was buckbrush.
That was a weed that we had to address first. And and how we attacked that weed was with a product called Chaparral. We knew we wouldn't get it on one pass because the problem was that bad, but we've sprayed every inch of this ranch now with that product to wipe out the buckbrush. And the second pass, we've really cleared up, I think, at least 95% of that particular stemmy-based weed. We were in some pastures this morning that you'd be hard-pressed to find a weed. You can find one maybe every 100 yards or so, but we're at the point this year with a pasture like that we may not have to go in and spray this year. So we get a year off from spraying, and we can go concentrate on fields that the weed control isn't quite as good.
Dow AgroSciences' specialized field team works closely with cattle producers like Bill to identify weeds, review product options, and recommend pasture improvement programs that build forage quality over time.
Prescription is the key word here. It's not going out and doing the shotgun effect where you just go out there and say, I've got weeds, you pull the trigger on whatever herbicide is the cheapest, and then you've got weeds again, that year later on or the next year. Prescribing is key because yes, cattle prices are high, but that doesn't mean we need to be foolish with our money. Let's be wise with our money so we can put more money back in our pockets.
When you drive by our place, we want people to look at our cattle and basically say, "Now there's some nice cattle." And when they drive by our pastures and they look at those, they say, "Those are some of the nicest pastures we've ever seen." It's not overgrazed. It's well taken care of. We can't find a weed on the place. I mean, that's really the dream.
Bill, that's a great video and more importantly, a fantastic story. Tell us more about what you've done to optimize forage production in your operation.
Well, I mean, as the videotape, portrayed, it's been weed control, ultimately it was number one for us for beginning. And now it's increasing the seed volume that we have of the grasses and legumes to enhance the pH level in our acreage without adding fertilizers and that sort of thing. But weed control will always be predominant for us. I mean, we have to have volumes of forage, and then it's working on the protein level that those volumes inhibit. That's critical for us.
Tell us more about some of the challenges that you've faced as you've tried to rebuild this operation.
Well, Mother Nature's number one. I mean, we obviously don't have any control over that. So what we have to take into consideration are the temperatures and the amount of precipitation that we get. So our conservation program is really centered around managing those variables best we can. We try to contain our water, rather than let it just run off the place into the nearby creek. That's number one, and number two is we just again keep increasing forage on every acreage that's available on the farm, and then we have to consider north-facing hills, south-facing hills. Different situations require a different recipe, when it comes to different weeds that we have to treat or different seeds that will grow in those environments.
Sims, let's head south to Texas. I know the cattle operation is critically important, but you also run a big hunting business as well.
Yes,
Tell us how you manage grazing for both your livestock as well as your wildlife.
We're in a rotational grazing system with being one herd, and we rotate those livestock around in a pasture at one time. By doing this allows the pastures to grow and recover and benefit from the cattle and sheep moving through. When they do this, then the deer and the turkey and the quail are allowed to be left with cover, and they can stay in these pastures instead of having to move away from the livestock. One of the things we have to do is to make sure that we have water available in all the pastures at all times, regardless of where the livestock are, so that they can stay at home.
What would you consider some of the key best practices that you've used to optimize production and grazing for all these livestock?
Again, rotational grazing is the key factor to our operation. Without it, it'd be hard to find the balance between them. Our brush management is another key aspect. We have to make sure that the rancher in us doesn't take and clear out all of the land and not leave any cover for the wildlife. So we have to remind ourselves that we're also in the wildlife business a little bit too.
Mm-hmm. That's very good. And you guys have been doing this for what, 5 generations? Is that
yes,
right?
Sir. Yes, sir.
That's outstanding. Well, we're going to have much more discussion about the best practices in pasture and rangeland management. But if you'd like more information about improving your forage, Dow AgroSciences, or any of our discussion topics today, you can always visit the website rangeandpasture.com. Still to come on NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll talk about the best ways to control mesquite, plus tips on using a backpack sprayer, and an update on the Environmental Stewardship Award program. Stay with us. We'll have more with our panel right after this.
This is yours, and so is what grows there. Not theirs or theirs, yours. You need this to fight this and this to grow more this. Because the more of this you feed them, the less this you spend on that, which leaves more of this here. Don't let them take this from you. Chaparral takes care of weeds and brush, and that's that.
To truck guys, the truck is everything. And when you put them in charge of making an unbeatable truck, good things happen. This is the Ram 1500, the 2014 Motor Trend Truck of the Year. And first ever back-to-back winner. Guts, glory, Ram.
Welcome back to this special edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen as we hear from the range and pasture experts with Dow AgroSciences and learn about ways to improve your grass and forage resources. Mesquite is a huge issue in Texas and much of the Southwest. Dave, let's begin with you. Why is mesquite such a big issue?
Well, I tell you what, the biggest thing is it's an absolute water hog. I mean, it really soaks up the water. It's got a deep tap root. And really in some of the most arid parts of the world, it's going to shut you down pretty big. It also reduces grass forage, which has a big negative impact on ranches. And it also eliminates or, kind of precludes grazing in certain areas. Gotcha. So you don't get good grazing distribution, and that is a real tough deal as well.
Sims, I know mesquite is a big issue in your operation. Tell us a little bit about how you've managed that in the past.
We've used several treatments. We've used mechanical treatment with grubbers on dozers and excavators and loaders. We've also done a little bit of chaining years past. We've also done IPT with chemical, such as backpack sprayers and four-wheelers, and we've even had some aerial spraying.
Very well. When it comes to controlling mesquite, there's a new standard and a very effective herbicide from Dow AgroSciences called Sendero that ranchers are putting to work in their operations. Let's learn a little bit more about Sendero in this short video.
Are you open to a new way to stop mesquite? Do you want to open more of your rangeland to grazing? Open your eyes to the new standard in mesquite control, Sendero herbicide from Dow AgroSciences. Sendero clears the way to more grazing land for livestock and more fringe habitat for wildlife. In the American Southwest, mesquite is the rancher's arch rival.
It's a constant battle we're fighting. You know, these mesquites are so fast. Canopies get so big we can't grow grass.
Mesquite can wall off entire sections of rangeland from grazing. Its deep tap root pulls up water during lengthy droughts that wipe out more desirable plants.
We're constantly spraying mechanical treatment, you know, everything in the arsenal. Try to maintain it at a decent level. This stuff gets out of hand. It's really difficult for us to gather our cattle out of the pasture.
Old mesquite control methods can consume a lot of time and money without solving the problem. Mechanical methods damage native grasses, and they're labor-intensive. And many herbicides affect only top growth, promoting even thicker resprouting from the underground basal bud zone.
No matter what you do, it's coming back. You know, it's so hard to kill. It's very prolific.
Now, Dow AgroSciences introduces Sendero to control mesquite. In aerial trials, Sendero provided control at more than 10 percentage points better than a mixture of Remedy Ultra and Reclaim herbicides, which has been the industry standard for 25 years.
So with the new product that we've got coming out, Sendero, I think it's going to open some doors that maybe we haven't had in the past. Across the board, we were getting on the average about 60% root kill with Reclaim and Remedy. And we were able to up that to 72% root kill on the average with the new combination that outperformed any other combination of herbicides that we tested.
One of the big issues we've always faced is the consistency with the control. That's one thing we're really hoping with this new Sendero product is if we can tighten that consistency and get some better results.
We significantly reduced the variability in those plots in terms of the amount of kill that we rated in those plots. So that's a big plus.
Sendero is the most consistent chemical control of mesquite ever. It's 40% more consistent than a mixture of Remedy Ultra and Reclaim.
I'm really looking forward to this new Sendero product. Just another tool in our toolbox to attack things with. We've got the high hopes for it. I think it's going to work.
Pat, tell us a little bit more about how Sendero works to control mesquite.
All right. Sendero is a foliar-applied herbicide, so it can be put out either by air, a broadcast treatment, or an individual plant treatment. One of the great things about Sendero is that it is very, I wouldn't say just specific to mesquite, but tends to be more active on mesquite species and then leaving some of the more desirable species, much like Sims was mentioning one of their objectives. And so you may be able to spray over the top, take out the mesquite, leave the oak, for instance.
Very good. You know, mesquite tends to thrive during the drought, and drought has been a major issue for producers in nearly all areas of the country. For insight on weathering and then recovering from a drought, we spoke with Charlie Hart with Dow AgroSciences in Texas.
Pastures that are destocked during a drought properly are going to recover faster. And then when you come out of a drought, being able to come in and control weeds, be slow to put cattle back in and increase those stocking rates back up, allow those grasses time to recover. And those are the pastures that are going to recover faster. And we've seen it here. We've seen it in Texas. Basically, when you're coming out of a drought, there's really no better time to control weeds in terms of just the benefit you're going to get from that weed control. And it may not be that you just grow a ton of grass that particular year, but it's a recovery process that's going on. And you've got to give those forage plants the time and the moisture to recover. And weed control is going to help speed that process up. The weeds take away forage production. Anytime you take away forage production, you have to reduce stocking rates, and you reduce stocking rates and you reduce calf crop or whatever it is you're raising, and it's money out of your pocket, absolutely.
So what are some of the other considerations as we begin thinking about both weed and brush control on drought-stressed pastures? Pat, you want to begin?
All right. Well, the forage base is stressed, so there's a lot of opening there for when you're coming out of a drought, there's a lot of open ground, so to speak, that weeds germinate. And so that is a very key time to make sure that you're controlling those weeds so that you're devoting those resources back to that forage base so that forage can begin to respond and recapture that site and rebuild again.
Sims, you have some personal experience in this. What would you add?
During the droughts, we've noticed, especially in these recent ones, that when you start to come out of the drought, the one thing that flourishes is the mesquite, especially around your waters and your corners where the livestock tend to lay. And if you can come in on this new growth and treat it chemically, you tend to have a better success rate at managing it.
Bill, what considerations would you add?
Well, similar to what Sims has, is just a different type of weed base that, that lays dormant, under normal conditions, and then the drought, after they thrive. And then at that point in time, you have to be there prepared, to address the issue, or the forage that you want is, it's just not going to flourish.
Very good. Thank you so much for your insight. Don't go away. We'll be back with more on improving forage production right after this.
This is yours, and so is what grows there. Not theirs or theirs, yours. You need this to fight this and this to grow more this. Because the more of this you feed them, the less this you spend on that, which leaves more of this here. Don't let them take this from you. Chaparral takes care of weeds and brush, and that's that.
Whether you're feeding cattle, milking cows, or baling hay, the work on your farm is never done, which is why you need equipment that works as hard as you do. Get the efficiency and versatility you need with Case IH. From Farmall compact and utility tractors to balers and mowers, all Case IH equipment is designed with one thing in mind: getting the job done. To learn more, visit caseih.com/livestock.
Welcome back. Today, we're focusing on ways to improve the use of forage in a cattle operation. And Dave, I want to begin with you. What can growing more forage mean to a producer?
Well, in a single word, it's flexibility. Producing more forage allows you to either stock more cattle, which will help in expansion. It can certainly help you plan for drought. The more forage you have on your ranch or in your pastures, when it gets a little bit dry, allows you to, kind of spread out the grazing a little bit and keep the cattle on your particular pastures. So flexibility to me is the key component of what extra forage means.
And Bill, my perception is that growing forage is not as challenging to you as it may be to Sims, just by virtue of the amount of rain you get. What are the benefits you see in growing a lot of forage in your operation?
Well, I mean, it's all the things that Dave said, quite frankly. But for us specifically, it allows us to expand the herd, and it allows us to backlot more heifers and enhance our contained cattle herd, which we like to do. And it allows us to keep the most productive animals on the ranch.
And what practices or tools do you rely on most heavily in maximizing forage production?
Number one for us is weed control. We have to have great weed control so that the grasses that we overseed with, which we do spring and fall, can thrive.
And Sims, I would ask you that also from a producer perspective. What tools and practices do you rely on most?
Our most important tool is our rotational grazing. In our drought area, it seems like we're always either in a drought or coming out of one. Continuously watching the cattle and watching them move through the pastures and leaving enough forage to come back to for the next drought is our most important tool.
And Pat, as producers begin implementing or desiring to implement some weed and brush control programs, where do they begin?
Well, I think the most important part is just to assess what is your current situation. What are the type of weed pressure or brush pressures that you're dealing with? If you look at Bill's situation where he acquired a piece of land that was neglected. You have to really start from a standpoint of controlling kind of a broad spectrum of different weed and brush problems to get your area back in, or your pastures back into production. And so just scouting and assessing what is the situation that we're currently in, what do we currently have out there, and what are our management goals, what do we want to shift it to.
You know, all these products that you all have listed behind you and all the others from competitors, it can be kind of intimidating selecting the right product. What would you tell producers from that regard?
Well, from that regard, I think you work with your distributors and with our range and pasture specialists. They can help you identify what are the problems, what combinations may need to be put together. And then as you adjust your program, as you move further and further along, those input costs become less because you're now managing a good forage production so that it actually resists weed invasion. So you're maintaining a healthy forage, and it's less inputs to accomplish that.
Very good advice. And remember, if you'd like more information about any of our discussion topics today, you can visit the website rangeandpasture.com. We'll have more right after this. Stay with us.
This is yours, and so is what grows there. Not theirs or theirs, yours. You need this to fight this and this to grow more this. Because the more of this you feed them, the less this you spend on that, which leaves more of this here. Don't let them take this from you. Chaparral takes care of weeds and brush, and that's that.
Your herd, your business, your family. You've always protected what matters most, so you know how important vaccinations are for healthy cattle. And with Vista vaccines from Merck Animal Health, you know you're covered. No other vaccine works like Vista. Only Vista gives you complete dual-action pneumonia protection and complete one-dose fetal protection for the entire pregnancy. Protect what matters most. Talk to your veterinarian or animal health supplier about Vista.
Welcome back to this special edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen as we get insights into the value of forage in cattle operations. Dave, I know one of the things you're most proud of is Dow's long-standing sponsorship of the Environmental Stewardship Award program. Why is that so important to your organization?
Well, I tell you what, we really believe that these fellas right here and many of their cohorts are the original stewards of the land, and they do such a fantastic job of making sure that our natural resources on their private enterprises are conserved. We really feel it's important that the rest of the nation understands that story, and we want to help get that story out to the general public, and that's why we sponsor the ESAP Award.
And that's a great way to do it. And Sims, I want to congratulate you and your family once again. That was an exciting award. What does that mean to your family?
Oh, we're so honored. We can't even begin to pay tribute to everybody for recognizing us for this and to put our name up there with some of the greats that are members of this league of elite ranchers, and it's just amazing, and we truly blessed.
I know your dad has taught you an awful lot about managing a ranch and drought conditions and the harsh environment that you've dealt with for 5 generations down there. What are some of the key lessons you've learned?
The most important thing I've learned over the years is to always pay attention to the rangeland, to be looking at it and looking at what's growing on the ground. I can remember a lot of days riding around with my dad, either walking through the pasture or riding horseback, and not down the trails or the roads, but along in the pasture, looking at the grass, looking to see what's growing, what forbs, what browse, and seeing what the livestock are eating and what they're leaving behind, and then knowing whether or not what you're doing is working or not and adapting to that situation. That and always be preparing for the next drought.
Very good. Well, it's quite an honor for you to have won that award, and I want to ask you a few more questions in just a minute, but first, let's take a short trip to the Frank and Sims Price Ranch in West Texas.
Just after sunup, Frank and Sims Price are working side by side to move their cows. The father and son represent the fourth and fifth generations on the Price Ranch. That includes nearly 70,000 acres spread across 4 counties in West Texas.
We're a family ranching operation, goes back to 1876 when my great-grandfather first came to this country. You know, it's rare that families these days get to continue an operation and have the opportunity to work with their son.
Knowing the fact that it has been passed down for so many generations, it just gives you that extra drive to always see things through and through the hard times and the droughts and everything else. Gives you a sense that you have to keep going.
Today, the Price family gains income from hunting leases, a purebred sheep herd, and their primary focus, a cow-calf operation with 11 grazing units, managing each one so there is rarely a need for supplemental feeding of the cows.
You take feed out of the picture and you've reduced your labor, you've reduced your equipment costs, fuel costs, and we're able with our grazing program for the cattle to respond very well to that. We adjusted our calving season to where we're working with nature better.
Drought and wildfire have devastated much of the Price Ranch in recent years. One key to sustaining the business is their single herd grazing program that results in many pastures getting 120 days or more of rest. Frank creates detailed grazing charts to guide the movement of the cattle.
He has really figured out what works for our operation as far as moving cattle, when to move them, and being able to read the land and tell if what we're doing is right or if what we're doing is wrong and how to adjust to that, if we need to destock, if we need to move faster.
He is one of the best grazing managers that I know of. And in terms of how he rotates, he thinks about where they're going to go next and he puts it into the whole package.
Another key to improving grasses on the Price Ranch is brush control, often done in partnership with NRCS, using prescribed burns and mechanical and chemical methods of removing mesquite and other invasive species.
Without the NRCS, we would be covered up in brush. The NRCS helps make this a profitable business in the fact that they help us with the brush work.
They understand the value of grass. They understand that their sustainability is in grass production, not necessarily in livestock production. I think they view livestock as a tool. It's an important tool to them, but a tool to harvest the forage that they're growing.
For Frank and Sims, the work of caring for their land is never ending. With a focus on following their budget and business plan, the future of Price Ranch looks secure. Frank and Sims are working together to build on the family legacy of stewardship.
I'm proud of the fact that my father, a fourth-generation rancher, has stuck through the hard times. He's taught me to stick through the hard times. I'm continuing to learn, and without his perseverance and dedication to this ranch, we wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be allowed to be coming back here to work on it. And I pray that I can carry that on to my children someday.
It's a moving target, but working with that land and trying to make it better for the next generation, that should be our goal in life.
Sims, you and your family should be really proud of that. That's a great example of stewardship. And Dave, I'd ask you, I mean, you see a lot of these environmental winners. What would you consider to be some of the common themes or some of the best practices you see being applied to be good stewards of the resources we've been granted?
Well, I look at it in two simple words, being active and aggressive. A lot of these folks are very active in getting out there and assessing what's going on the ranch constantly, day by day. They're not doing this from an armchair, you know, in the house or on the front porch. So that's very important. And then most of the time, when they see problems that crop up, they're very aggressive in dealing with those situations, whether it be the need for additional cross fencing, whether it be the need for water development. They actively and aggressively get out and solve those issues. And that's one of the big trademarks.
Bill, what might you add?
Well, you know, I think it's a lot what Sims talked about. You need to spend a lot of time in your pastures. You need to spend a lot of time going over the acreage, looking at what weeds have cropped up, which ones are you containing effectively. And also importantly, you have to be vigilant, and you have to be persistent at addressing the problem. And I do think it does become, you develop a passion for creating, what's the vision for your operation.
Mm-hmm. And Pat, you get on a lot of operations. What are some of the key themes you've seen to be successful?
I think it's like what Bill was just saying, having a vision. You're always managing towards a goal. You're not just solving a or trying to address a particular problem, but you've got a vision in mind. Where are we going with this? And I think the legacy that both of these gentlemen talk about in their operations is just a testament to how these ranchers work on their property.
Well, you certainly create both a vision and I think a challenge for all of us to be good stewards. You can nominate yourself or a fellow producer for the Environmental Stewardship Award. To get more information, just visit the website environmentalstewardship.org. And to find out more about weed control and forage management, another great website is togetherwegrowgrass.com. Don't go away. We'll get some tips on using a backpack sprayer right after this.
This is yours, and so is what grows there. Not theirs or theirs, yours. You need this to fight this and this to grow more this. Because the more of this you feed them, the less this you spend on that, which leaves more of this here. Don't let them take this from you. Chaparral takes care of weeds and brush, and that's that.
I'm an NCBA member because NCBA, they look at the facts, they look at the history, and they look what's good for the industry.
It's important to be NCBA members just because of what NCBA does. They keep us informed about a lot of things that are going on nationwide.
The reason we're an NCBA member is we think that it's the best voice that the cattle people have.
Join NCBA today. Head to beefusa.org or call 866-USA-BEEF.
Welcome back. Now, earlier we talked about mesquite and the fact that controlling these plants early before they do serious harm is the best option. And with us now is Pat Birch telling us a little bit more about how to control mesquite and other brushy plants. Pat, let's begin with the backpack sprayer. How can this be an important tool for ranchers who are trying to control brushy plants and mesquite?
Yes, well, the main thing is its versatility. These can be used for basal applications, which are set up to spray oil at the base of the tree, or it can be used as a foliar application. I generally like to have a dedicated piece of equipment, so that one I use for water and one I use for oil. But this particular one is set up for basal application right now. The important thing that you need to consider is that it has to have oil-resistant seals. Okay. Those are generally called Viton seals, and you'll see that on, it's usually specified by the manufacturer when you're purchasing it. The other thing about this is the wand that comes with the backpack. And it is a plastic wand. It's very flexible. As you can see, the shutoff here is at the handle. And so if you're making an application, the amount of herbicide that's in this tube, this wand, will actually treat several stems. So if you're making the application and then as you walk from plant to plant, you're going to end up dripping herbicide, which is not a very responsible thing to do and not very cost effective.
Sure.
But you can manage to minimize that amount of drippage by using a check valve. Okay. And these are very simple to purchase. These check valves have an ability to shut off at about 5 psi. They can be inserted here right below the spray tip, and that'll work pretty well at reducing the amount of dripping. Okay. Now the other thing that we have is the more deluxe wand, as you said, the gold-plated wand.
That's right.
This one is set up different. This is an ultra-low volume wand. Okay. Now the handle here is the same, but our shutoff now, there's a cord that runs down the tube and actually shuts off at the tip, and it's a very crisp shutoff. This is very expensive, but the one that I have that is actually attached to my backpack at home is now about 25 years old. Wow. So it lasts a long time. It also has it's a lot more rigid and durable for pressing it down into like a rose bush or something like that where you're making the application.
Very good. Pat, I've heard you talk about both cut stump, I should say, and basal treatments. We don't have mesquite in our country. Tell us a little bit about the differences between those two treatments.
Yeah, and the good thing is that that this kind of an application applies to all brush species.
Sure.
So it will apply to your situation as well.
Mm-hmm.
When we're making the low volume basil application, we're making the application to the lower 12 to 15 inches of the stem.
Mm-hmm.
So from the ground line up about 12 to 15 inches, you're making the application all the way around. As you'll see, we also have root flares here. These are surface roots. They can sometimes pop up a little bit different distance from the stem, and those should be treated as well. So we're treating any kind of bark that's exposed that we can see. So that's how we're making our low-volume basil application.
And the cut stump, through the magic of TV, we've already cut it.
We've already cut it, and so when we make that cut, now we've got an exposed cut surface here, and we want to either use a water-soluble herbicide and make the application immediately after cutting. So as soon as you cut it, set the saw down, make the application to that cambium layer. You don't want to waste any time. You want to put it on right away. Now, if you're using a low-volume basil technique, you can actually still come back anytime afterwards, make the application here, as well as to any exposed bark or root flares, just the same way we would with the low-volume basil technique, but now we don't have the tree above it. Generally, when we talk about cut surface treatments, where we're cutting it and treating a stump like that, low-volume basil works very well for up to about 6 inches diameter. Kind of depends on the corkiness of the bark.
Okay.
But generally up to about 6 inches. So once you get larger stems than that, that's when we would start making cuts. The type of the herbicide that we're going to use, most people are familiar with the cut surface treatment that is applied with Tordon RTU herbicide. That's a water soluble. So that would be the application we put on immediately after cutting. If we're going to do this with the low-volume basil mix, the basil cuts surface treatment, then we're going to make that application anytime afterwards. You know, you can be days, weeks, months afterwards, as long as it hasn't started to resprout. And we're going to make that with either Remedy Ultra herbicide in oil, or we're going to make that with Pasture Guard HL herbicide in oil.
Very good. Thank you so much for coming on the show and for these practical tips. We'll be back with Baxter Black and more right after this.
It's the official monthly publication of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. The National Cattleman is produced exclusively for NCBA members and includes coverage of the news and events affecting our industry. Every issue includes market analysis, feature stories, and practical management tips. Start receiving your copy of The National Cattleman. Call 866-USA-BEEF or go online to beefusa.org and join today.
Join your fellow cattlemen in sizzling hot San Antonio for the 2015 Cattle Industry Annual Convention and NCBA Trade Show. It's the beef industry's biggest convention, and it's great for education, networking, and fun. Plus, you can check out the NCBA Trade Show for the latest technology. It's the 2015 Cattle Industry Annual Convention and NCBA Trade Show in sizzling hot San Antonio, Texas, February 4 through 7. Visit beefusa.org for more.
So what do you care if your cattle are source and age verified? Better yet, do you think the housewife cares? Well, 70% of consumers surveyed want to know where their food comes from. So where do you start? With this little green ear tag. IMI Global is the seal of approval that stands behind the beef you produced. IMI is engaged in source and age verification from the cowman to the kitchen table. So if you're ready to start, just ask us. IMIGlobal.com.
Let's face it, you don't think a lot about your trailer hitch. You use it and forget it. We understand. But at B&W, we think about it. Short nights, long hauls, never-ending chores. The unthinkable. We think about it all, so you don't have to. B&W. Trusted.
Sometimes when we go to our livestock meetings and see all the technology, we forget about the cowboy and the horse. I'll remind you practitioners of modern agriculture, there are still places where a cowboy and a horse are an essential part of the management, where it's more expedient to treat the critter where you find it rather than try and drive it or haul it to a squeeze chute or a trap 2 miles away. If you have the luxury of a 2-man crew, you can head and heel them right there. But for the lone rider, his skills got to be at a higher level. The critter's got to be caught, restrained, treated, and then released. Now in real life, catching an animal means roping the head, the horns, the heels, one hock, or any combination. Now restraining usually means putting the beast on the ground. No matter what appendage you have roped, you can drag him till he slowly keels over. Patience is required, not a lot of hoorah. And when he falls, you keep your rope tight while you take a couple dallies and a half hitch, commonly called a hooey, around the saddle horn. This will hold as long as the rope stays tight to the critter. You get off and you follow your rope down and wrap a loop of the loose rein around the rope to keep the horse's head pointed at the calf. Put your weight on the down critter and put your slip knot of your piggin string on the down front foot. Push both hind legs together forward and arrange them on top of the looped front leg, and you might include a fourth leg besides. Take 3 wraps around them, pull them together tight, and I mean real tight. And then 1 or maybe 2 wraps in a hooey, and he's ready to be treated. Now you can loosen or let go your catch rope. Now this description of our skilled cowboy making the perfect catch and tie down holds true. Unless, of course, your horse lets the slack out of the line when he shouldn't, or gets tangled in the coils, which he also shouldn't, or the dally slips, or you loop the piggin string over your own wrist, or the critter gets loose and runs under your horse's belly, who then deserts you 3 miles from the pickup and loses your rope somewhere along the way. But don't worry, that never happens. This is Baxter Black and the Cowboys from out there.
Thanks, Baxter, for those cowboying tips. As we wrap up our program, I'd like each of our panelists to share some final thoughts. And Dave, let's start with you. I know Dow AgroSciences invests millions of dollars in research and development. Tell us what's on the horizon.
Well, I tell you, we've working on several really cool projects. One of the things that we're always trying to do is find a wonderful herbicide to control unwanted annual grasses in our perennial grass situations. Another one, we've got several different seed affiliates that are big into forages, and we're always looking to partner together with them to find the perfect herbicide and introduced forage type program so that we can bring an entire package to ranchers and say, hey, if you want to get a little extra forage, here's the perfect way to do it, and walk them through those steps, A, B, C, and D, all the way down the line.
So I'm interested, as we wrap up the program, just getting all of your perspective on the role of weed and brush management in maximizing forage. What would you tell producers?
I'd tell them to get going. Really, there's a lot of information out of there. We've got a lot of information that can help folks. If you're a little unsure about how to get started, give your retailer a call, give your applicator a call, give us a call. You know, come visit rangeandpasture.com. Find out what information you need to get started and then get the ball rolling.
Very good. Bill, what would you add?
Similar, you know, I think data is important, knowledge, you know, relative to what kind of forage tonnages are you getting. Make sure you have the ability to measure and see that you're getting improvement, you know, rather than guess. Look at your protein levels that your grasses are providing, and also utilize the resources that are available to you. I mean, they've been abundant for me in my local environment, and really have paid huge dividends for us.
Very good. Pat, what would you tell our viewers?
Well, I would just echo what Bill is saying, because you know, Bill came into a situation in a very short amount of time, has got that piece of property really in great impressive production. And so just turning to those resources that are available. There are some very knowledgeable people we have on our staff, as well as those partners that distribute our products. And I think turn to them and as a great resource for making decisions.
Very good. Sims, I know you don't get to run cattle down in your country for 5 generations. unless you're able to manage those forage resources accurately and well. What guidance would you give folks?
I'd just say that if you want to expand your herd or grow heavier calves to wean each year, the cheapest way to do that is to create more forage. And to do that, you got to manage your brush. It's cheaper to manage that brush than it is to go out and buy more acreage.
Dave, you and the organization you work with have been such big sponsors, both of our program and the Environmental Assurance Award. Tell us, one last word, what tip would you give producers?
I'd say look forward to a great growing season. Get out there early, assess where you are, be aggressive in your management plans, and follow through, and you'll be very, very successful this year. Everything is set up perfectly for you.
It does look pretty good, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the show, for providing your personal and practical guidance and experiences. I know this is an area that regardless of how good individually we are, we can always get better in this area, and we really appreciate your insights today. Dow AgroSciences' full range of products can be suited to fit nearly any rangeland or pasture. Now, for help selecting the best product for your individual situation and management goals, you can visit rangeandpasture.com. That's rangeandpasture.com. Well, that wraps up this edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here next week on RFD TV.